Miss Dimples. Good evening, everybody. I just got the finger from Jim. It's all part of the story. Right.
Hey everybody, it's Darren from the Business Power Hour. I'm not going to be in the studio tonight. I'm traveling.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Business Power Hour with Darren and the Music Man, except Darren's not here.
I'm here.
No,
I'm
you're
right
not
here.
Does anybody see that? Darren is not here. Darren is away.
I am right here, right
Be quiet
next
for
to
a
you.
second. You're not here.
Everybody,
Well, I don't know if you got lucky.
Not the really interesting question.
That's a fantastic question, Norman.
Wow. See, I got fantastic. You just got good. I got fantastic.
Show's about him, so let's focus on that. Were you drinking before the show?
And the
Oh,
Music Man,
Jesus.
except Darren's not here.
Oh, Jesus.
There we go. We got it.
Let's go.
No, it's
Now we got to
There you go. Okay.
smother it.
So, I think you got a music thing.
It's making noise.
It's making music.
Is it?
Yeah. That's so sweet. That's so sweet of you, Darren.
By the way, this is a Yankee station.
It's a
Thank
Yankee
you.
station, John.
Thank you.
It's a Yankee station.
All right.
Unfortunately,
We got bugs in here. What's going on?
I don't know.
Do you spray? Get an
It's
exterminator?
that time of year where you're getting bugs and stuff. As long as we don't have bees, I'm good.
Yeah, all right. That's
But
We have a lot of undulations out in the field. Undulations.
Is that a wine? What the hell is undulation?
Fred, don't use big words. Hey, right? So this.
Help.
I gotta give him a cough button, Jim. What do you think?
Cough button
Because-
would be a good idea. Consider that a good question that he asked?
Great
There you go.
There
There's a
you go.
good
I got
question.
Pythons and brains.
You're double D?
I'm double D. Show's about him, so let's focus on that.
Hey, give me some loving.
How are you, Music Man?
Hello, Darren. How are you?
I'm fantastic.
I'm
this week.
absolutely convinced. I'm absolutely convinced that
telling
you
you.
got some kind of brain damage when you had that thing last year.
I'm telling you that, and he called. And
Not classy, but classy.
Seeing interviews by Darren and the Music Man. Ladies and gentlemen, Darren Siafi and Norman Wasserman.
Let's do this. Yeah. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Business Power Hour with Double D, Darren Dimples, and
Good evening, Music
Double
Man.
M,
How you doing?
Music
tonight?
Man. We're good. What a beautiful day today. Wasn't it nice?
Oh my God, this whole week has been fantastic. Let me
Really,
tell
really
you.
nice. Good stuff.
I am so pumped up about this, the weather that we've been having. It's just been absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, we got Father's Day coming up. Hopefully the weather will
Father's
stick
Day.
around for Father's Day. You got any plans?
No,
Okay.
I'm going to take it easy.
All right.
You know? So how about you? Going to see
I'm
the
sure
kid?
I'll get my invitation from one of my princesses that will call up and say, hey, Dad, why don't you come on over? Keep your 6 feet away, wear a mask, and bring your own food to eat.
Yeah, no, I want to. I may go flying on Father's Day. That's what I like to do. So
In a plane?
in a plane, yes, without my
That's-
wing. You know, I don't have to
That's-
flap my wings that hard when I
That's
do that.
healthy.
You know,
That's healthy. So we got an announcement to make at the end of the show.
at the end of the
And,
show. Well, actually,
Yeah.
I saw you post something that was very interesting. So
Yeah, that's all part of the announcement.
it's
so
all
if anyone is
big-time stuff going on, right?
Yeah, if anyone's a fan of Friend Entertainment, a new era about to start, hopefully, unless there's a problem the rest of the week.
Yeah,
But,
well, I would. You know what? I tell you what, it's going to be exciting. But we have a really good guest tonight, right?
We have a doctor tonight.
Well, and actually, this doctor is in a networking group with you, right?
He's in a lot of networking groups. He's very, very well known. And for those of you that don't know him, we're going to interview him right now and introduce you. So will the real Dr. Marc Miller please identify yourself?
The real Dr. Marc Miller.
Do you remember that show? Do you remember that show? Well, the real.
Well, that was, yeah, it was.
My line, was it?
What's my line? Is that what it was?
What's my line?
What is my line? So hi, Norman and Darren. How are you?
Good. How are you, Mark? Dr. Mark?
Dr. Mark, how are you this evening? Welcome to the show. We appreciate you coming on. And, explain to everybody what type of doctor you are.
Right. Yeah, introducing me as a doctor must make most of the people think I'm an MD doctor. I'm not a PhD doctor. I'm a shrink by background and training. So I got my doctorate in psychology when I was a young man, really 27 years old. And I'm a lot older than that at this point. And I did psychotherapy for a long time. And for the past 15 years or so, I've been doing coaching rather than therapy. And we can talk.
Baseball coaching? What kind of coaching?
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
You got to explain yourself to this crowd.
Coaching means sports coaching, but hopefully there are some people out there who realize that there are coaches who work with people to bring out the best in them, not on the ball field or whatever the sport is, but in terms of their relationships, in terms of their mental state, in terms of their, just their business success. So that's the kind of coaching I do.
So how did you get into, you were a shrink, as you say.
In the beginning, how did you decide what you wanted to do?
Yeah, how did you decide to even go into that field?
I think there are people who just know that that's what they are meant to do and what meant to be. Psychology is probably, I'm pretty sure it's still the most popular undergraduate major. At this point, more women go into psychology than men, and it used to be a long time ago, more men than women, but it's kind of like if you're a good listener and you have friends who always tell you their stories and, cry on your shoulder and, all that stuff. Some people are good at listening and good. It's not about giving advice, and I could talk a lot more about that. It's about listening more than anything else. And when I went to Queens College, I'm a local guy, and I went to Queens College, saved my parents some money. And it was the only thing that really excited me and interested me. And I went right from college to Adelphi, where I got my doctorate. It took me a few years to get it because you have to write a dissertation. And by that time I was married to my first wife. And I had just as my first child.
He belongs to our club.
A lot of people belong to that club.
We're in the same club.
Right. So it's been, so it was, doing a doctoral dissertation can be a pain in the ass, frankly, if I'm allowed to say that on Facebook.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're on the internet, babe. You can say whatever you want.
All right, there you go. So a lot of people are what's called ABD, all but dissertation. A lot of people go to graduate school to become psychologists. And most people get the doctorate done. They get the dissertation done, but not everybody. So it took me a couple of years, but I was 27 when I got it done. And by that time, my firstborn, my daughter, who's now 42 years old, was just born. So that was kind of an incentive for me to get it done. But I love helping people and listening to people and trying to help them figure out how to solve problems in their lives. And
well, what kind of problems are you referring to? Are they business problems, relationship problems, social problems, problems paying the rent? What kind of problems?
I don't know about the rent problem, because if they can't pay the rent, they can't pay me, so that can be a problem. But as a therapist, as a psychologist or a psychotherapist, you're supposed to treat people with mental disorders, psychiatric disorders. And I did that for many, many, many years. So it meant working with some very depressed people, some suicidal people, people with relationship problems that were really heavy duty. Most therapists don't work with severely mentally ill people. If they're really like psychotic, they really need medication and often hospitalization. To be in a therapy relationship, you have to be able to talk, you have to be able to reflect, but the goal is to cure somebody of some kind of, psychiatric disorder. And I did that.
You don't do anything like that. You don't write scripts.
I never wrote scripts. Psychologists do not write scripts. Psychiatrists do. It happens that my wife is a nurse practitioner in psychiatry, and as a nurse practitioner, she can write scripts.
Oh, so you guys feel good.
She wouldn't write me a script if I have trouble sleeping sometimes. I say, honey, just write me something. No, I can't.
That's all.
It's unethical for her to do that. So
I'll
no.
give you some of mine. I can give you some.
There you go. So now
what
you
made-
drugs on the air, right?
Exactly. So what made you transition from being a psychologist to a business coach? Because look, you and I know each other. I do business coaching also. And
Okay.
I made the comment to you before the show that there are times where I feel like I'm a therapist,
Okay.
working with these business owners and working. But what made you want to say, hey, you know what? I can help these business owners.
Yes. So I think a big part of it was after doing therapy with a lot of depressed people, a lot of people with abuse histories, PTSD. I got a bit burnt out. And then I heard about coaching.
Mhm.
I went for a course in the city that specifically was about executive coaching. And I loved it. And I use all the skills I ever learned as being, from being a therapist for many years. But coaching is a little different. I'll talk a little bit about coaching if that's okay, and then talk about business coaching as I see it. And we'll compare like the way you do it and the way I do it, Darren. So a lot of it has to do with your background and where you're coming from. But as a coach, I'm trying to help people bring out the best in themselves. I'm not telling them what to do. I don't give advice. Coaches are not supposed to give advice, unlike sports coaches who give you advice, right?
Mhm.
If you're doing something wrong, if you're throwing the ball wrong, you know what? They're going to say, do it this way. Coaches are not supposed to do that. They often do. And if you do that, Darren, I'm not knocking your style, but the International Coaching Federation, which I belong to, is the global organization that sets standards for coaching, for professional coaching. And the way I coach is I mostly listen, and I listen to what my client is saying about what he or she wants to work on. They set the agenda, and I listen to what they're saying and what they're not saying. I pick up on certain words and may ask them about them. My goal is to help them go deeper, not into their past necessarily, which is what shrinks generally do, but into understanding their personality, why they behave the way they do, why they react to certain people the way they do. Okay, so putting that into the business context, I work with senior managers who have to manage a team of people, who have to deal with people above them in the hierarchy, who have to deal with, getting their people who are different and have different skill sets to work together as a team. And oftentimes, people who are supervisors or managers or leaders in organizations don't really know how to communicate that well. They may be there because they own the company, or because they've been there long enough, and if they're good at certain things, they can, it's the Peter principle, you rise up to the level of your incompetence.
Right.
Very often, they're not good at managing people or relating to people or communicating with people or motivating people. So,
Mark, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Do you find that a lot of these people that you coach and such have some psychological problem too, which enables them or makes it harder for them to do what it is that they need to do business-wise?
Okay, let me answer it this way. One thing I didn't like about being a psychologist doing psychotherapy is diagnosing people and seeing people in terms of their mental disorders or what's wrong with them. One of the things about coaching that I love, it's a much more positive attitude about people. We really look at strengths more than weaknesses, but I also, help people realize that, if you have certain weaknesses, either get better at it, which is hard to do, or delegate it to somebody else.
Well, let me ask you this question. You ever have a situation where you're working with a management team, actually two owners, partners, and one partner knows the other one is just crazy.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And
of course, the other guy is saying the same thing about it.
Right. But we know that about partners, right? Yeah.
Right.
We know that about partners, right? Partnership is like a marriage, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But did you ever have that situation where you got two partners and they're not just getting along? So it becomes like the therapy session of how do I work through this thing? I mean, my coaching and I'll just quickly explain my coaching. My coaching is I'm teaching structure. I'm teaching them how to create structure. I'm not telling them this is the way they should do it, because one of the things, like you said, I got to get them to come to what works for them.
Right.
Get to realize what they need.
Exactly.
But I give them, I'm more, here's how to structure it when you're going to build systems, when you're going, again, as an accountant and my background being accounting, I'm about the structure and about the systems.
Right.
But there are times where I'll sit there for 45 minutes and just listen about this happening and that happening. And I had this happen over the weekend.
Right. And you don't want to hear that shit, right?
And you know what? I come to realize it's part of the whole.
It is.
Because their personal life does affect their business life. I don't care what anybody says.
Absolutely.
Can't leave. You can't leave work at work and home at home. It just doesn't work.
Right. So that's more within my comfort zone. When people go there, it's okay, because that's part of the way I see people. It's not like it's just a business owner or a partner or, whatever the profession is. They're human beings, and their emotional stuff is what goes on and gets them into trouble. Okay. So that's all very relevant. And that's where my psychologist training and my psychologist head, I think, is very helpful to me working with people. I rarely will talk to somebody about what you just mentioned, Darren, the structure of their business, or the way they're managing their workflow, or the way they're dealing with accounts receivable, or that kind of stuff. But my focus is more on how their emotional reactions to situations is either working in their favor or against them. And there are different things that trigger different people, so I'm very focused on understanding what triggers people, what gets them upset, what gets them angry, what makes them scared or anxious. And that's—
Is it a generalization? Do a lot of your clients have the same type of problem?
Everybody has different problems, Norm. So, I just want to go back to the question you asked before, to say that, some of my clients could be diagnosed. They could be narcissistic personalities, or they could be even borderline personalities. Most of them are somewhere in some, everybody could be called a certain personality disorder, or they get depressed, or they're, they have an anger management problem. Okay, so those are all realities about certain people. And maybe, some very successful people can have terrible tempers. So I can help people on learning how to be aware of their own emotional reactions and learn how to get control over them. Okay, but we react to everybody reacts to different people. There are different triggers that trigger us. And if I may, because I love talking a little bit about this, I'm not, as a psychologist for so many years, people said, well, you study the brain, you know how the brain works. When I went to graduate school, they didn't know much at all about how the brain works, really. And it's only fairly recent that scientists are learning more and more about how the brain works. And I've learned some things, but the most important thing I've learned is that there's a part of the brain called the amygdala that gets fired up when there's a perception of danger. And this goes back to, it's called the reptilian brain. It certainly goes back to caveman times. Most animals have this thing in their brain that signals when there's a danger. So if there's like a predator in the area and you're whatever, a caveman or, a reptile, you're going to react to that. And most of the time you react with either fight or flight. Okay. And that's a very quick thing. I just learned this part of it. At the back of the brain, and if this gets too heavy for our audience, I'm sorry, I apologize. I just like getting into this a little bit. The back of our brain is called the occipital lobe, and it's connected with our vision. So if we see something that's dangerous, before we even know we see it, it's already firing a signal to our amygdala, which is making all kinds of things happen. Cortisol gets released. We get into fight or flight mode. There's also another track to our amygdala, which takes longer to get to, which goes through kind of from the back all the way to the front of our brain, which is called the prefrontal lobe. The prefrontal lobe is our smart brain. It's our most evolved brain. It's our judgment. It's our executive functions. It's our judgment. It's our empathy. It's our ability to communicate really well and to size up what's going on a social level. But it takes longer for the signal to get there. So most of the time when we're feeling threatened, not by a predator, but by a social situation, when people are pissed off at us or, you know, or threatening us.
That never happens to me. Nobody ever gets mad at me.
There's so much, you know, similarity between the two of you, though.
I
mean, even though you do different things, seriously speaking, Darren, you got to go through the same thing with your clients.
Right.
So well, yeah, I mean, there's times where, yeah, we run into those type of things. And sometimes it can be very challenging when a client is worked up to you know, to say the least.
Right. And when they're worked up like that, they're not thinking clearly.
No.
They're reacting to that primitive part of their brain and doing fight or flight in one form or another. So what I think all coaches do and therapists do it too, without even realizing it, is helping people talk about what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when people say count to 10 before you react, it literally takes about that much time for the signal to get to your front part of your brain, your prefrontal lobe, and then it can get processed in a more rational way.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk to our clients, whether you're doing it or I'm doing it or anybody's doing it, part of it is you put it into words, put your feelings into words, that changes it right there. And then your judgment can come into play. What happens if I go off and tell my boss what I really think of him? You know, I'm going to lose my job. So I better calm down. Or if I'm working with staff, I have a team working for me. I'm a boss. I'm a manager or a boss of some kind, and I'm yelling and screaming. I had a client recently. Actually, this one goes back a few years. I was brought into this firm because this guy, I'm not even going to say the kind of profession because I don't want to divulge anything. If anybody,
oh, come on, tell us who it is.
It's not somebody you'd know, but it's an organization you might know. But it's a profession where this guy was in charge of reviewing documents to make sure that they were correct. And what happened, most of the guys who were people, men and women who were working under him, were lazy or haphazard or sloppy, and they'd make mistakes. And this guy would get pissed off. He'd get furious. He'd scream, yell, and curse at them. And nobody wanted to work for him because he was a nasty guy, and he was smart as a whip, and he was right, and his standards were high, but nobody wanted to work for him. So his boss brought me in. I mean, luckily they found me through their HR.
In that case, and you know, I'm against, and it sounds like the guy was more of a negative reinforcement type of guy.
Oh yeah.
When something was wrong, he tore into you, and this is the way I want it. And like I react very poorly to that. It's like it completely turns me off, and
Most people do. It's not a good management style. It sucks.
No, not at all.
Style. And people didn't want to work for him. They weren't motivated to work for him. Sometimes fear, you know, can motivate you up to a point, but after a while, you don't want to work for that guy. Most people leave their jobs because their immediate supervisor is somebody they don't like because he treats them badly. So this guy's boss found a coach, me, luckily for me and for them, to work with this guy. And we had some success. He learned, you know, I said to him, I'm not going to change you. I'm not going to make you into a brand new person because that's not who you are. And he was a guy in his 50s. But I am going to help you learn how to calm yourself down. Take some time before you react and scream at people, because this is me, you know, whether he's going to lose his job over it was a question because he was really valuable to the organization, but it was going to limit his ability to move up in the organization. And that was what he wanted to do. So I worked with him on that issue being the main one, how he dealt with his anger at people being incompetent.
You ever have a company recommend to you two people that were sort of like vital to the company, like say in a sales department, but they weren't getting along, or someone was accusing somebody of stealing a client or whatever? Did you ever have that?
that's kind of like the partnership thing that Darren brought up before, so it can happen between any two people.
No, it could.
I mean,
Yes.
generally speaking, I have not been brought in to mediate, and I actually am a divorce mediator by training too. So getting people together and helping them talk is something that I believe in doing, and we'll talk more about that later. But generally speaking, if there's a problem between two people, it's kind of like something has to happen. Either one of them has to go, or the other one has to go, or they work it out.
They got to work it out, right?
And
Which is what everybody wants them to do.
Most organizations are not willing to pay for a coach to work with a lower level person or two people. If it's between a boss and a subordinate, who needs the help? Most of the time, the boss is going to say that person's difficult, that person's a pain in the ass, and that person often gets put on probation and often gets let go. But oftentimes it's the boss who has the problem, especially when there's a pattern of, like the guy I'm talking about. This guy, it wasn't just one or two people, it was everybody. So he had the problem, and he's the one who needed coaching and benefited from coaching. Okay, but there are other issues that come up just in terms of becoming a better leader. So there's a kind of coaching that's called remedial coaching. When somebody's screwing up.
So what's remedial coaching?
Okay.
So, we have different types of coaching that we all know, right?
Right.
Remedial coaching is really, is that changing behavior? Is that trying to change behavior, or?
It is, but the problem with remedial coaching, Darren, is it's usually somebody's job is on the line, and they're told, because of whatever behavior, like anger or whatever, if you don't get your act together, you're getting out of here. And oftentimes a coach is brought in, if they're brought in at all, because HR says, well, you have to have paperwork that says that this person you've tried to help them and they failed. So then you can let them go at some point.
You need documents.
You need documents. So most people who are assigned for remedial coaching are not really motivated to work on their stuff. They're doing it because they have to. And let's face it, when somebody really wants to, when you see coaching as a plus, when you see coaching as something, this is going to help my career, this is going to help my life, then you're motivated to do it. If you're doing it because if I don't do this, I'm going to get fired, it's a little harder to get them committed to doing it because they're already upset. They're already feeling I'm on my way out anyway. I've done it a few times. I've had a little success with this guy that I'm telling you about. It was in effect remedial, but he wasn't on the verge of losing his job. He just wasn't going to get promoted to the next level. All right. The other kind of coaching is called developmental coaching. And that's where the organization feels like this is somebody with a lot of potential, and we want to invest in that person getting better so that they can move up in the ranks and become leaders in the organization.
So when you do developmental coaching, are you working with them just on their personality skills and interaction skills and communication skills? Because you know what, we all know this. Every organization, the number one reason they fail is communication.
Exactly.
Right? Because they can't communicate properly.
Exactly. So communication is one part of emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I love emotional intelligence. I love that idea that, we all have areas that are not as strong as others. Okay. And some people are really bad at communication. Mm-hmm. Communication involves a bunch of things, which I think are important. Like, how well do you listen? Because it's not just what you say and how you say it. It's, are you listening? Are you listening, just so you can step in and squash somebody with the next thing you're going to say, because it's a form of combat? Or are you listening because you really want to understand and you want to let the person you're talking to, whether it's your, somebody on your staff or a peer or a client, you want them to know that I really care about what you're saying to me. And that can't just be phony. That has to be real. But
now, Mark, do you work with coaches? Because like the coaching industry has exploded, right? I don't even really like to use that term anymore.
Yeah.
Because you got everybody who signs up for a program, and guess what? You take a few tests and you're certified coach in this program and you're off and running, right? And you're considered a coach.
Right.
And a lot of these people have little to no background in any of this stuff.
Correct.
I have my background in accounting and just working with small businesses, a lot of what you're talking about, I've experienced through the years, and that's what evolved the whole coaching piece of it. But at the same time, I'm no expert like you are in this area. And I know that there's a lot of people who come out and coach and go, well, no, this is the way you should do it because that's what my book says that I got. Do you work with coaches on understanding these things and that type of stuff?
To some degree. When we talk later about divorce coaching, I actually am mentoring people going through a divorce coaching course, and it's really focusing on how to coach. But I've done that informally. Some of my clients have been coaches, and what I like to think without being, I mean, how do you differentiate one coach from another? Because there are a lot of coaches out there, let's face it, like you're saying, and almost anybody can, some people don't even take a course and they say, I'm a coach.
Yes.
Or they just say, I know how to coach, but they give advice rather than really doing what coaching is. I mentioned before, I think before we got on the air, there's the International Coaching Federation, which is a global organization that sets standards for coaching around the world. And there are very clear rules and competencies about how to coach, and listening is the most important part of it. So I like to think that what I bring to coaching and business coaching is I make that connection between psychology and business. Okay.
What do you do for charities? I know that you also work with some charities. What do you do for them?
I've recently done some pro bono coaching.
Do you treat them as a business? Because a lot of, especially smaller charities, they really are a business, but they don't act like a business.
Yeah, I haven't done a lot of coaching in not-for-profits. I'd like to, because I know some of them can afford to pay me, and I don't charge exorbitant fees. But lately, I've done, especially over the past couple of months, and it's certainly intensified during COVID. I've been doing some pro bono coaching because I know some organizations are hurting and some people are hurting because of their economics. And I like doing, I like getting paid for what I do, but I also like donating my time to people who are good people who really can benefit from the kind of coaching I do. And it's something that actually is encouraged by the International Coaching Federation to donate time. I'd like to do more of that, actually. So, I think there are a lot of good not-for-profits out there, a lot of charities, as you put it, that do a lot of good work. But they're still organizations. They still have interpersonal issues. Some of their leaders could benefit from coaching.
Do you find that when you work with charities, because it seems, and we deal with a lot of charities on the show and we love them to death, but a lot of people are involved in charities because they have a personal vested interest in that charity,
right? Which
could, from my point of view, which could skew their
thinking.
Sure.
Their decision making in making the right decisions for the charity overall. Right. And sometimes they're making decisions based on what they want and not necessarily what's in the best interest of everybody.
Yeah.
You find that?
Well, again, I haven't had, you may have had more experience in that particular, area of working with charities, but I think it's true for anybody. I know some people who have started their own charities because their child had a certain disease or because their spouse died of a certain disease or something like that. So there's a tremendous emotional connection to the cause of the organization.
Right.
But running an organization is hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's a business, whether they're doing it for profit or not, it's a business.
The only difference is they don't pay taxes. That's the only difference.
Well,
it's true.
You're very cynical, Norman. I don't know.
I live in that world. I live there.
Okay, and for some people, I'm sure that's true. But I know there are some really, really good organizations out there. The food banks on Long Island, the various ones, I'm not going to name names, but they're doing amazing work, especially during this time. As a couple of months ago, there was something called International Coaching Week, and I'm the past president of the local chapter of ICF, of the International Coaching Federation. Mm-hmm. I reached out to some not-for-profits, And I had trouble getting through to a couple of people who run the big food banks on Long Island because they were so damn busy, because the COVID had hit and economics had already hit and people were out of work, and how that's affected donations that I've given more during this time, because I really I hope everybody what they can do.
Right, and I don't know if you're aware, Mark, and I'm in the Air Force Auxiliary, the Civil Air Patrol.
Uh-huh.
We've been doing a ton of work with Island Harvest, and
Yes.
we've been there every day for the last 2 months. As a matter of fact, Friday was a big thing. We had almost 70 people there.
That's great.
Helping, handing out meals and putting meals together.
That's phenomenal.
How many meals did you give out?
I have no idea how many. It was thousands of meals that they put out.
Really?
Harvest is a wonderful organization, and I actually reached out to Randy, who I had met.
Right, Randy's a gentleman that we work with.
Well, actually, Randy, I think is the woman who runs.
Oh, the Randy, yeah. Well, no, there's another, but there's one guy though that coordinates everything with us.
Yeah. Okay.
I thought his name was Randy. I'm sorry.
Okay, I may be wrong, and I'm sorry I stepped on that, but these organizations, they're working their asses off and they're doing good work, and I would love to be able to help them. If they need help. Sometimes this is something that I like to say. Okay, and I know I'm jumping on you guys, but too many people don't realize that we can help them. I'm sure you know this, Darren. I mean, it's just the experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I don't need help, or my business is very successful. Well, maybe it could be more successful, or I have a big turnover, but that's okay. That's my business model. Well, you have a big turnover of employees because you're a lousy boss.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if you could make an investment in working with a coach who can help you realize how you can manage people better, how you can be a better person and a better boss, and have your people love working for you instead of hating your guts and dreading going to work, your business can be more successful. That's investing in your business and in your people, right? But too many people don't get it. There are the enlightened people who get it. And, every coach in the world is looking for those people.
Right.
And there's everybody else who could really use the kind of help that he can give.
The ones I find I get the most satisfaction out of are the ones that when you first meet them are the ones that are that hard case. Where they're fighting you tooth and nail and bringing them around. And it usually takes a while, but they know they need help, but it's like the first stage when an alcoholic or a drug addict realizes, you know what, I need help, but they really don't want it.
Right.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah. It's
the contemplation phase. There's
right
thinking about it, but they're not ready to make the commitment.
Yeah. Well, maybe I got a problem, but I'm okay. That's
denial, really.
Right.
That will lead me into your therapeutic divorce work that you do. People sometimes realize they need a divorce and they don't want to, and they sit down, I guess, with you and they talk, and they both say, by the time they get done, you get me the hell out of here, then I got to get a divorce. That's the way it's got to be. Tell us about your practice regarding divorce.
Okay.
The relationship.
Yeah, there's two parts to it, because one is I would rather help people work on their marriages. Marriage is hard, and I had mentioned to you guys before, I was married before. A lot of people have been divorced and remarried. Marriage is hard. Second marriages are hard too. Part of why the statistic is as high as it is, 50%, is second marriages often don't work because people don't learn their lesson, but communicating and compromising is really hard. And stuff happens in marriages. People cheat in marriages. People do a lot of things that can destroy a marriage. How do you repair it? It's often very hard to repair it. And sometimes marriages are beyond repair.
You got to want to repair it.
You have to want to repair it, and both people have to be committed to that, and it's hard.
Exactly.
And if you have kids, you have an added incentive. You really don't want to mess up your kids. But some marriages are destined to fail. One or the other person wants out. And, you there are different ways of getting a divorce, but if people are not aligned, like most of the time people don't agree. Yeah, let's get a divorce. We both want it. It's usually one person who wants it and the other person who can be totally shocked or surprised about it, or find out that their spouse is cheating or whatever. Coaching, divorce coaching, is very specifically designed to help one of those people, not both of them, because at that point
So wait, so what's the difference between divorce coaching and
uh,
marriage counseling?
well, marriage counseling, you're trying to make the marriage work. Divorce
Okay.
coaching, you're helping an individual deal with the stress of getting a divorce. I've been trained as a divorce mediator, and that's another story. I haven't done as much mediation as I would like to, and I know a lot of mediators who are excellent. So I'd rather do the coaching part. Because when I learned divorce mediation, I thought it was going to be like marriage counseling or coaching. And it really has a lot to do with money, and it has to do with investments, and it has to do with property, and it has to do with arrangements about custody. And when people are sitting together in the same room and they're getting divorced, it can get hairy at times. And that's what I'm good at. I'm good at helping people calm down so they can look at what they have to look at. But by the time they're getting a divorce, it's usually one person who I can help just get their head together.
So you're only working with one side. You're not working with both sides.
For the divorce part. When I'm working on relationships, I'm working with both people. And when you do divorce mediation, you have both people in the room.
Right. Yeah. No. I understand that.
Yeah.
I've been there.
Okay, you've been there. All right.
But what I'm saying is that if somebody comes to you and says, I'm going through a divorce, I want you to coach me through it.
Right.
You're working with one side or the other. You're not working with both sides.
I'm helping that person deal with the emotional stuff that's going to prevent them from thinking clearly. Because a lot of divorces, and you're an accountant, about money. It's about how we divide our assets. It's about how we, divide our pension plans and all that stuff. And if you're so angry at your spouse because he or she did such and such and they really screwed you over,